What is up, everybody? It is JT Sports. I am back to you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. Michigan defeats Ohio State 42-27. Coach Jim Harbaugh gets the biggest victory of his career. Finally, Michigan has finally been able to defeat Ohio State. This has been one of the most memorable years in college football. There have been so many great games this year, but I feel like this game that we just watched today has to definitely be one of the candidates for game of the year, because when you look at Ohio State, in a lot of people's eyes going into this matchup, myself included, was guilty of this. I felt like Ohio State was the more talented team going into this matchup. And when you look at great teams, they always find ways to come out on top with the victory. They always find a way to find the trap door. But for Michigan, every time it looked like Ohio State was going to find a way to open that trap door and win this game, Michigan just kept closing and locking back up the hatch. Like, Ohio State was in so many third and long situations. They either converted or they found a way to pick up some yards and make it a fourth and manageable. They were converting on fourth down. Like, there were a lot of momentum swings in this game. Earlier in this game, Michigan was driving the ball up the field. Then they had a big interception in the red zone. You thought that was going to swing the game in Ohio State's favor. And for a while, it did seem like this game was in Ohio State's favor, at least in the second quarter. But then in halftime, Michigan just came out like some hounds, man. Like some hounds. Every time Michigan got the ball on offense, you knew what was coming. You knew Michigan was going to run the football. Now, they did do a good job in critical moments, switching things up. You had some trick plays in there. You had the big J.J. McCarthy throw there. Like, Michigan did a good job of throwing some different wrinkles at Ohio State. And for Ohio State, man, I know Ryan Day and Buckeye Nation has to be incredibly frustrated with how their defense performed in this game, because this is a similar performance that Ohio State played defensively way earlier in the season when they were defeated by Oregon. And Michigan pretty much did the same thing that Oregon did to this Ohio State defense. They didn't beat them throwing the football for 400, 500 yards through the air. They beat them with a ground and pound attack. And that has to be really demoralizing when you as a defensive coordinator knows that the offense that you're matched up against is going to run the football, and yet there's nothing you can do to stop it. There's nothing that Ohio State could do defensively to stop the onslaught, which was the Michigan Wolverines' ground attack. Corum had a really good game. Hassan Haskins had a big day. But I mean, Jesus, man. Every time Michigan went to the ground game, it worked. And for Ohio State, I feel like what really dictated the outcome of this game early was when Ohio State got in the red zone and they had to settle for 3 points instead of settling for touchdowns. I feel like that was so big, because what made this game really interesting is that the first drive, Michigan came out hot. Then the second drive, they drive down the field. They get in the red zone. And then next thing you know, Cade McNamara throws an interception. And then you're like, oh, God, okay. Ohio State's probably about to take control of this game. And it seemed like every time Ohio State was about to take this game by their grabs, Michigan said, no, not today. Like, Michigan came in this game with something to prove. And I mean, they've always had something to prove every time they played Ohio State, but you just look in their eyes and you could just tell, like, every time Ohio State looked like they were about to crawl back into the game, Michigan just shut that trap door shut. Now, for CJ Stroud, he played an outstanding game. An outstanding game. Like, the offensive line had so many penalties. They were backed up so many times, and you felt like Ohio State was just going to have to end up settling, getting rid of the football, having to punt it back to Michigan. And yet, when it looked like all odds were against Ohio State in certain situations, they still find ways to get back into the game. They still found ways to keep drives alive. Like, there were so many times Ohio State was backed up, 3rd and long situations. They would either convert or they'll find a way to make it a 4th and manageable, and then they will convert on 4th down. Like, Ohio State just would not go away. It's like when you have a fly flying around you, you think you killed it, next thing you know, 3 minutes later it's back flying around the roof. That's what Ohio State was. They were like roaches. You kill one and they keep coming back, and then you kill another one, they come back in the swarm. They come back in the army. Now, for Jim Harbaugh, man, like, this had to be a really great feeling for him. Because remember, around this time last year, we didn't even know if Jim Harbaugh was going to return back to Michigan. There were rumors about him going back to the NFL. There were rumors about Michigan not going to bring him back. Michigan brings him back. He takes a pay cut. Michigan fans aren't expecting that much. Michigan fans were expecting a letdown season. And yet, Michigan ends up beating Ohio State. They're 10-1. They're going to the Big Ten championship game next week. Like, this has to be a great moment and a great feeling for Jim Harbaugh. And I'm so happy that he was finally able to get it done, because I've been one of the Jim Harbaugh defenders for years. I've been defending Jim Harbaugh. And it's finally paid off for him. I'm so happy for Michigan fans. I'm so happy for Jim Harbaugh. And if you're a Buckeyes fan, man, like, I know you're probably upset because you go down for the 2nd time this year, but you're still going to end up most likely playing in the New Year's Six bowl game. You won 10 games, but I know Buckeye fans expect to be competing for national championships every single year, but you do have to admire the fact that this was a great game. This was one of the best games played this year. Corum, Haskins, they couldn't be stopped. And then you got to talk about the effort on the defensive side of the football for Michigan, because they got after CJ Stroud. They had several sacks in this game. Aiden Hutchinson alone had 3 sacks by himself. And this was against one of the best offensive lines in college football. Ohio State is going to have multiple guys on this offensive line playing at the next level on Sundays. They're going to have multiple guys on this offensive line who are going to be drafted in the first 2 rounds of the upcoming following NFL drafts in the future. And Michigan's defensive line dominated. But even though Michigan dominated up front on both sides of the ball, like, Ohio State just kept on finding ways to get, big plays. And Ohio State really shot themselves in the leg, and that really tells you just how good of a team Ohio State really is, because they shot themselves in the foot several times this game with multiple penalties. And yet they were still able to find a way to crawl back and still put themselves within striking distance to win the game. But it's just that, eventually it caught up to them. They had too many penalties. They made too many mistakes. And CJ Stroud didn't turn the football over. It's just that there were so many errors on the side of Ohio State when it came to beat them themselves that they eventually just couldn't come back from it. And normally when you're a talented team, you can have a couple of things not go your way. You can have a good amount of penalties and still win the game. You can have some miscommunication problems and still win the game. But when you're playing a team that's just as good as you, those mistakes get multiplied, and sometimes you end up putting yourselves into a situation that you can't come out of. Sometimes you end up digging your own hole and you can't dig yourself or climb back out of it. And I kind of felt like that's what happened in this game for Ohio State, and you can't really say that too many times about a team like Ohio State. This was just a hole that Ohio State dug themselves in. That was just too much to climb out of. And this game went the exact way or similar to how that Oregon game went for Ohio State really early in the season. It looked like Michigan just gave them a spanking in terms of what they did up front. And the name of the game is being able to win the battle in the trenches. A lot of people forget that the game of football hasn't changed that much from what it used to be in the 60s and 2021. The big storyline was, how is Michigan going to game plan for Ohio State's explosive offense with the phenomenal freshman running back they have, the elite group of wide receivers they have, Smith, Olave, Wilson, and those guys did do work in this game. But the thing is, Michigan made more big stops when it mattered, and that's why Michigan came on top. There were a lot of momentum swings in this game. Every time Michigan scored, and it looks like they were going to put the final nail in the coffin, Ohio State would strike back, and they would still put themselves in the spot to win the game. But eventually, Michigan was able to prevail. I'm so happy for Michigan fans. This was an incredible game. You guys give me your thoughts on this game down in the comment section down below if you're watching this on YouTube. Also, make sure that you check out the JT Sports Podcast. Every video that is uploaded on the channel is available on all podcasting platforms in audio format. Wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. Spotify Podcast, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, the JT Sports Podcast is available. All you gotta do is type in JT Sports Podcast on any podcasting platform, or go down to the description down below and click one of the links. Make sure that you leave a 5-star review on the podcast, and make sure that you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and college football videos, and I appreciate you for watching.